Namaskar. Welcome to the VIF Conversations. Today we'll be discussing India-Nepal relations. Prime Minister Modi is visiting Nepal on 11th May to discuss the current status of India-Nepal relations and also the importance of Nepal for India. I have with me Shri C D Sahay, former Secretary R, and also a senior scholar at the Vivekananda International Foundation to discuss the importance of Prime Minister Modi's visit. So let me begin with you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. Prime Minister Modi is visiting Nepal, and this is just a month ago. Prime Minister Oli was here.
Yeah.
So are you seeing a big transformation in India-Nepal relations?
I'm certainly hoping for one, but I am not aware of two prime ministerial visits in succession happening so quickly and coming so soon after. You may recall that Nepal has just gone through a long period of elections from the local levels to the provincial level and the federal level and national level, and have made a transition to constitutional democracy. It was a very smooth process. The elections went off very well, very smooth, largely incident-free, and with considerable over 75% electoral participation. And considering that this is the first time this kind of election has been held, it was a tremendous achievement. Mr. Oli and his party and the alliance, his alliance partner, Prachand-led Maoist Centre, swept the polls except in one province, and very substantial, convincing majority they came up with and formed the government, which is a very healthy sign for Nepal's transition to democracy. And we have in India always supported and backed an inclusive representative form of government. So we should be welcoming that, and we did welcome and also welcome the Prime Minister of Nepal, who is in his second tenure. Even in the earlier CA2, under CA2, he was the Prime Minister, and then after the elections, he has come back with that majority in a democratic setup. The relations had, and we must acknowledge that, taken a dip at some stage, which one would like to, I suppose, forget as well-wisher of India-Nepal relations, and that had unfortunately happened during the previous tenure of Mr. Oli. So it did leave some scars which need to be raised and forgotten about, and these Mr. Oli's visit last time gave a clear indication that there was a serious intent on part of Nepal to move forward after the elections and under the new dispensation. I also feel, as an analyst, that the government of India has also suitably responded to those sentiments, and the visit of Prime Minister Oli went off extremely well. And I would not like to go by the normal yardstick of judging these bilateral visits, particularly in the context of our neighboring countries, where we tend to go by the number of agreements signed and the number of projects finalized. This was neither the intent of the visit, nor would have been perhaps the right way to go in that into that relationship, because in any case during the previous visits, and this is the third visit of the Indian Prime Minister from 2014 when he took over, and it's exactly 8 years now, that this is the third time he visited Nepal, which is very unusual, but actually seems to form a part of Prime Minister Modi's neighbourhood first policy. He has visited Bangladesh also and covered all the countries, including Pakistan. You might recall the Lahore visit, till which time the relations had gone off very well, and then there were setbacks. The visit of Prime Minister Modi this time will be slightly different in its message and content both. He starts off the visit with a prayer at the Janki temple, which has been the Janki Dham project, the Janakpur project has been very close to his heart. It forms part, a very important node in the Ramayana circuit. Then from there, after 11th visit, prayer there and a public reception, he would proceed to Kathmandu for the official part of the visit. This is also part of the official, but the talks. He will be given a civic reception there, and also later he will go to Muktinath temple.
So there's something very special and something unique about India-Nepal relations, as the very program that has been set out shows. And yet India-Nepal relationship has seen its ups and downs, and you mentioned the dip in the last tenure of during the last tenure of Mr. Oli. But that's not really specific to one Prime Minister or one person. But let's discuss a little bit about the nature of India-Nepal relations. I mean, we say that it is a special relationship, there is a special treaty which binds the two countries, and yet there is a little bit of a tension also sometimes. Could you just explain to our viewers what are the basic issues in India-Nepal relations?
This is a very complex issue. When we start talking about India-Nepal relations, the basic catchphrase, which is true also historically and emotionally, is that we have what they describe as beti roti ka rishta, roti beti ka rishta. We have a unique border, the like of which doesn't exist with any other of our neighbours. It's a free, open border, and movement of people, the number of students from there who come here and study in India and go back, trade and everything. It is so intricately interwoven that one cannot possibly, talking about India-Nepal relation, think of a situation different from what it has been. The ups and downs in the relationship that happen are largely because of expectations which happen, which are bound to get generated, and external elements also come into play. But on the balance, one would like to believe that it has been one of the finest amongst our neighbours. We have our differences, so we have within our own families, and we vent them, we express them, and we continue to live together as very peaceful neighbours. I would not like to judge or evaluate the relationship in terms of how many projects we are doing, how much we have invested, and what are the dynamics of the infrastructure development, connectivity, etc., etc. It goes deeper. As we saw during that so-called blockade, for want of a better word, I would not like to have described it that way, but the perceived blockade, if you may, that virtually the entire life of the common man, the common people, can come to a standstill. There is total dependence, and it did not leave the population on our side of the border unaffected by that. It affected both, and very intensely. So that is the kind of interdependence we have. I cannot imagine Nepal and India living separately, exclusively, as two countries with very formal, structured relationship. This goes much deeper, and it goes, and it must go well beyond the dynamics or requirements or compulsions of politics.
In our media, in our discussions, very often the China factor is also brought in.
Yes,
China's inroads into Nepal, increasing investments. China wants to build connectivity between Lhasa and Kathmandu. They are also investing in Lumbini, for instance, which is very close to the Indian border. And often the Chinese have also given some impressions that India and China can work together in Nepal in terms of investment, etc. Yet there is, because Nepal is also part of our overall neighborhood, and China's growing investments and growing inroads into South Asia is also a matter of some anxiety in India. So how does this Nepal factor enter, the China factor enter in India-Nepal relations?
If we look at this aspect of this trilateral relationship, China has traditionally maintained that they cannot replace India in this dynamics. It cannot be also a one or the other, or one against the other. I think Nepal needs both of them for different reasons, in different ways. It is difficult to draw a line where one country or one country should stop and the other country should move in. It has not been happening. This perception has not been coming only in Nepal, but in other neighboring countries also. You look at Bangladesh, you look at Myanmar earlier, or Sri Lanka. We recently had the episodes in Maldives, and Pakistan, of course, is a separate issue. Not so much in Afghanistan, in the neighborhood, although during the Afghan summit there were messages coming out that China and India could cooperate in some joint projects. Now, that kind of a finish has to come in it. There are projects which are of strategic concern to us, which Nepal wants us to do, and we would like to do, like the Arvind 3, which is being jointly inaugurated by the two prime ministers during this visit, and another project which is has been on the table, discussed last time during Oli's visit here, and will be perhaps given some further fine-tuning about connecting Kathmandu to Raxaul. We have the highways, which are the lifelines of Nepal, both for movement of people and goods. And there are also, now I didn't say in competition, but corresponding projects being planned from the Chinese side also to ensure better connectivity. And another aspect which has now been talked about and looks extremely exciting is the river transportation system, which they would like to develop, and this could come down to Bangladesh also. We had the motor vehicles agreement for these areas. So when it comes to connectivity and when it comes to infrastructure development, and when it comes to major power and other projects, there would be perceptions like these coming up. But as long as the three governments can sit together, or bilaterally between each other, these little rough edges can be resolved. It does not, all projects need not be seen either in Beijing or New Delhi as us versus them kind of thing. It has to, we have all got to evolve a more cooperative attitude in this, not only for Nepal's development, but also for the regional, in the regional context.
So, in this visit for Prime Minister Modi, what would be the expectations on both sides? What is India's expectations, and what are Nepal's expectations?
I think both sides, and if one could put it in simple words, both sides would like to design a framework under which they can build on the past gains, forget about the little hurdles which they ran into, and then consolidate further. The building blocks, the foundation already exists. No one has to work on that. Any government trying to destroy that will not succeed, because these are very deep ties and go for centuries and centuries long. And those blocks are there. It's a question of now readjusting, rebuilding those blocks, which would benefit both countries. And according to media reports, which I happened to go through this morning, there is going to be an emphasis also on, and what that is very important, very critical, on deliveries. We both countries, and it's not only one party responsible for this impression, but on both sides they got to expedite the processes, clearances. Even in Arun 3, I believe that the processes of clearances, and there are any number of them in Nepal, as we have, from environmental to everything else, that process of preparation of project reports, finalization of the project, and completion, the delivery system has to improve. And that joint monitoring mechanism has been set up, and I can see there is a sense of urgency, not only in respect of Nepal, which is a very special case, but even in the other countries in our neighborhood, which is a very, very positive development.
So, this visit, and of course Prime Minister Oli's visit, the two together have the potential of taking the relationship to an absolutely new level. So that's one thing that I think you are saying, and also help improve implementation, which sometimes leads to many misunderstandings.
Yes, entirely, I agree with you. In fact, when we started our discussions, my first response was that I would like it to be, I hope that this turns into that. And now that we go through the discussions, I'm quite positive that these two visits will lead to the relationship in all its facets being taken to much higher level. And I also get a sense that this is not going to be a one-off effort, it is going to be a continuing process.
Well, thank you very much. I think that was a very important point you made, that there is this, the Indo-Nepal relationship probably will be now unfolding in newer areas, and there will be a restoration of confidence, which took a dent due
It
to
had.
that so-called
It had.
blockade, etc. And this also shows that India and Nepal are tied very closely, historically, etc. And the visits will now rough out or smooth out those rough edges.
Absolutely.
And we can look forward to a new era in India-Nepal
Absolutely.
relations.
From a transactional approach, which should not exist between come into play at all in our relationship, to a more substantive and continuous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.